Now that we've set our grid up, let's look at ways to use a grid system in order to make really dynamic content and to lay out space. So I like this particular idea, and there's a couple different ways that she sort of frames a similar notion. I want to kind of pull those out about mixing quirks with consistency. So consistency is what allows the reader to not have to read in granular detail everything inside of your text. But if things are too consistent, they feel dead. They don't feel like there's a dynamic movement throughout the page. So, as the writer points out here, Beth Tondreau points out, the most successful grids have consistency, order, clarity, and a strong structure. Then they shake things up. So this way we can play with that consistency, and because the reader knows what to expect, instead of being confusing, it adds a little bit of playfulness and energy to the piece. But there's enough consistency that the reader then doesn't become confused by what's happening where. So using that same stable basic structure, we've got the framework, the reader knows what to expect where, what kind of information that they're reading, what they should expect to have to take in, where they're going to focus, and then you can use other elements to bring in dynamic fun. So here we can see where they place the titles that can move around, but we have this strong like 2-column thing going on. We've got these repetition of this pattern of these blocks that go horizontally, but how it's being depicted, how it's being overlaid onto the page, where exactly the name of the company or the group that's going to be performing lives, those things can be moved around. You can play with how you interact with the image that's at the top of the page, but the reader still knows, okay, if I want to know how to book, this is where I go. If I need to know the website for booking my tickets or the phone number, I know where to go. The reader is able to then pull out what interests them and what they need. So this particular piece, it's a brochure for the Performing Arts Center at Purchase College, and that's part of the New York education system. And this sound organizational structure allows for quirky variations, which makes it really alive feeling. And given that we're talking about performing arts, that's really applicable. So we've got this master format, it supports the key information, and that's kind of used throughout the brochure. So as you can see from all of these spreads here, you've got an image in the top half, and then you've got the information. But the amount of information really varies from piece to piece. But we use color, use type, use positioning in order to make it clear to the reader what's happening. So along with having the strong structure, we also have very clear typographic hierarchy. So we know what's going to be the name of a performer, what's going to be the information on the date, what's going to be the textual information that'll tell me a little bit more than maybe the image doesn't tell me. I know where to find all of this stuff. So we use the same type font, and we use things like bold and color in order to kind of create this sense of continuity throughout. So remember, for you when you're designing, to consider all the relationships you're going to need to build into your piece so that you can keep your hierarchy really clear throughout. And if you set this at the beginning, it makes it a lot easier for you as you go through. You're not then caught off guard by a new kind of piece of information. And as I said, there's a couple different rules that play along the same line. Using weight, size, texture, shape, scale, space, color, all of these things can come together to have a really energetic look to your piece while you still have a coherent sense of what's happening where. So this, again, we're going to see a couple spreads from a magazine, and they're using color to talk about what kind of craft is being done in the region, and to highlight visually where in the US we're talking about. But we use a variety of shapes, we use weight, we use fonts, all those ways to kind of make things really interesting and fun and play off of this craft aesthetic, but it's still super, super readable. So you can see here, we've got this firm grid base, and we've got these kind of like lines, these bars that run throughout that draws everything together But the way that they've used the actual objects, the craft objects, and displayed them in the space kind of gives this fun energy to it. So this discipline grid, we are allowing the individual images, the pieces that are made by these craftspeople, to really shine. And the strong grid foundation allows them to mix all of these different pieces in a way that still feels really coherent. If it didn't follow the grid, it would kind of fall apart. So it's a really great way to bring everything together and to kind of play with all these variety of sizes and colors, but still have the reader not feel overwhelmed. So this is a 5-column grid system, and you can see on all of the previous pages up through here how it's been deployed. And elements will cross over between parts of the grid. So if you look at the right-hand page here with the chair that's in the bottom, well, the text bar kind of runs along 3 of the columns, but the actual bottom of that chair, you've got an interaction between these 2 chairs that kind of overlaps between 2 parts of the grid. But it kind of falls in the middle of that second column of text, and so it still feels like it's related to everything else. So in the next couple of slides, or the next section, we're going to look at some more techniques to, now that we've kind of got dynamics, how do we actually work with them and see them in action.